Welcome back to part 2 of installing the S8R receiver in your aircraft. First video covered flashing the firmware and calibrating this receiver. Now it's time to show you how to put this thing in the airplane and calibrate the stabilization system. And it also is going to show you how to set up the channels on your radio to be able to access the functions of this gyro system in here for flight stabilization. I've got my radio on, and the first thing we need to do is we need to set up the channels in this radio. So we're going to select our model. We're going to go all the way over here. I want to show you something on inputs. On the inputs page, you see channel, the first one at the top is throttle, second is aileron, third is elevator, fourth is rudder. Now I told you that this receiver is wired a little differently, that it lists the aileron as being the actual number 1, tells you that elevator is supposed to be number 2, throttle is 3, rudder is 4, channel 5 is your second aileron, and channel 6 is your second elevator if you've got 2 separate servos running your elevator. On the inputs page, you do not need to do anything. Leave that completely alone. The only time you should be on that page is if you want to do something like add expo or something like that to kind of soften your throws on your control surfaces. Other than that, leave them in that order. What you do want to do, however, is page over to mixer. When you get to mixer, that channel 1 through 4 better match the channels 1 through 4 on the S8R or the S6R. Once you fix those, and mine was set by default to be throttle number 1, aileron number 2, elevator number 3, and rudder number 4. Well, I had to go in there and change those to make aileron number 1, elevator number 2, throttle number 3, and rudder number 4 to match what the receiver says. As it says on the receiver, which you can't really see, the lighting's not the best right now, but I did show you that in the first video. But there's a couple other channels we need to set up in this receiver as well to be able to access the functions of the stabilization system. We're going to set up a couple of channels, and one is going to be for gain. That's going to control the sensitivity of the control surfaces when the system is trying to stabilize the aircraft in flight. The other one is going to be, let's see here, is going to be mode, which is going to allow you to select between normal flight with no stabilization, and you flip the switch and you go into stabilization mode. So we got to set up that channel as well. And then the other channel, which is pretty important, I call it the help me channel. The help me channel is there in case of an emergency and you lose orientation of the aircraft, or it seems to be flying completely out of whack. You can flip that switch and the airplane should right itself so you can regain control of it. So these, where they put these at is a little farther down on the list. They like to put the gain or the sensitivity on channel 9. And I know you're thinking, okay, this is an 8-channel receiver, so where does 9 and everything else come in at? Well, those are internal. So 9 is going to control a specific component inside that receiver internally for sensitivity. So we're going to scroll down to channel 9, and here's how we're going to set that up. You're going to long press it. You're going to go ahead and name it, and in this case I named mine gain. So we'll set it to gain. All right, and then what we want to do from there is we want to change the source. So what I'm going to want mine on is I'm going to want mine on this this pod right here. So I can adjust that gain like a volume setting when I'm flying, so I can get low, middle, 100%, whatever I need. So in order to do that, I'm going to take that switch to select it now that I've got the source flashing, and I'm just going to move that knob, and the radio will automatically change it to S1. Once it does that, I'll go ahead and hit enter. And when I do that, you're going to leave the weight on all these extra switches that we're setting up at 100%. You don't have to change that. Just leave those at 100%. Now what you're going to want to do though is down here where it says diff, where it says curve diff, you're going to want to click on that, and you're going to want to scroll that over to where it says custom. Hit enter. Scroll it over to the little 3 lines, hit enter again, and we're going to put that on a custom curve CV1. And I'll show you what we're going to do with that here in just a second. So this channel is set up now. It's set up on that volume-like knob, and we're going to set it to a custom curve, and I'll show you why we're going to do that and what we're going to do with that here in a moment. But let's go ahead and set up the other 2 channels while we're here. So we go back to mixer. The next one we have to set up is channel 10, which is an internal switch for being able to select your modes from normal flight to stabilization flight. So select channel 10, and I named that one mode. So we're going to go ahead and just name it real quick. All right, mode. We're going to go ahead and scroll down to source. I like my mode switch to be on a 3-position switch. So what I did is I selected this switch right here, all the way up the upper left, to be my mode switch. So what I'll do is, while that's blinking, move the switch, and it automatically selects that switch. Hit enter. Again, leave it at 100%. That's all you need to do. On this specific switch, you do not need to do anything else. Okay, so we're going to go back to mixer, and then we're going to set up number 12. Number 12 is the help me switch. When it gets out of whack, or it's flying uncontrollably, or it's upside down and you're disoriented and don't know which way the aircraft's flying, you flip this switch and bam, the airplane rights itself and you have control again. So here's how we set this one up. This is pretty simple as well. This is also the switch you're going to use to enter calibration mode once it's installed in the aircraft, to be able to calibrate your stabilization control surfaces to match your normal flight mode surfaces. So we're going to select this channel. I called it help me. So we'll go ahead and go to that. We're going to name it help me. Now it's important to note too that we're going to set this up on a temporary switch just so we can use it to access the calibration mode once it's installed in the airplane. After it's calibrated, after you've completely calibrated the gyro system to match your control surfaces in normal flight mode, then we're going to change this switch back to the spring switch so that you don't inadvertently switch it by mistake in flight, and so the spring switch can be used rapidly to get you out of a troubled situation. But right now it has to be on a 3-position switch because that's the only way it will enter the calibration mode once it's installed in the aircraft. Again, you're going to go down to source, and what I did with this one for temporary to be able to do calibration is I installed it on this 3-position switch right here. So what you do is once that's flashing where it says max, you go ahead and move the switch. Okay, so that is the switch it's on now. You go ahead and hit enter, back out of this screen. Now remember, the first switch that we set up for this stabilization was the gain. I told you to create a custom curve on that, and that's on CV1. So what we need to do is we need to page over till you get to custom curves. We set it up on CV1. So we're going to go ahead and program CV1. So what we'll do is on CV1 we're going to leave it at 5 points. So we're going to select that, and you can name it if you want to. It doesn't matter. We can call it gain, and we will. We'll call it GAI. So we'll go ahead and select that, name it gain, just so we know when we're looking at it for reference in the radio what that specific custom curve is going to. There's A. They only allow you 3 letters, so that's why we're doing GAI. All right. The standard is where it's at right now, which is flatlined. We want it to be a little different than that. We want to create a 5-point curve so that when the dial is turned all the way down, it's at 0%, kind of like turning your volume all the way down. The second point, we want to set it to 25%, the third to 50%, fourth to 75%, and the fifth to 100%. So we have full swing on that dial. So we're going to go ahead and change that to custom. And what we're doing here is you can see it over here on the bar graph by me turning this dial here. We want to change this to right there. Let's see here. Oh, what's going on here? There we go. We'll do the 5-point. Make sure it's on 5. And let's see. There we go. We want to leave that on standard, not custom. So we're going to go up here to 25, hit the button, scroll to the next one, hit the button so we can adjust it, take it to 50. Hit the button, scroll to the next one, hit the button, scroll it to 75. Hit the button, scroll to the last one, hit the button again, and take it to 100. And there we go. Our custom curve has been created. So now our gain knob that we're going to use, like a volume switch, is going to, if we turn it all the way down, there'll be like hardly any response from the gyros. And as we turn that knob up, it's going to increase all the way to 100 when we turn the knob all the way up. So that is set up. So we are set up now on our channels concerning starting with installing this receiver. Now we need to tell the receiver what kind of airplane it's going in. And what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to power up this receiver that we calibrated. Now if you've already installed it in the airplane, that's perfectly fine. But we have to power it up to be able to access the Lewis script. And since this receiver is still out of the airplane, I'm going to have to use my LiPo battery once again, plugged into my ESC, and then plugged into the receiver to power it up. Okay, receiver is on. So now to enter the Lewis scripts, anytime you enter anything that's got anything to do with the stabilization part of this airplane, you have to go to the radio settings again and enter that through the XSXR folder in your SD card. So again, you go to radio settings, to the second page. Second page is always your SD card. You're going to scroll down to SXR, just like we did previously. Hit enter. Now instead of going to calibrate, where we went to before to calibrate the receiver on the bench, we're going to go to SXR Lua. You're going to hit that. You're going to hit execute. Now what it's going to want to know is the wing type. Well, it's going in a specific airplane that is a normal wing type. We're not flying it in a flying wing, and we're not flying it in a in a drone or anything like that. It's just an airplane. And it's showing you a picture there that the receiver is reminding you that the pins need to be faced towards the back of the aircraft. Now, if that's the case, if you're flying it in a normal airplane, that's all you need to do on that page. So you scroll to the second page. And right now it's looking at the receiver to find out how the receiver is set up. All right, it's showing it there. It's showing channel 5. Remember, that's the one that has aileron 2, and channel 6 is elevator 2. It's giving you options there to change those two. You can't change the first 4. You can only change these 2. So in this specific instance, I'm going to turn these off because I want to use them for something else like flaps or something. So we'll call them auxiliary. And I'll go to channel 6, which is elevator 2, and take it off elevator and put it on auxiliary 2. So now those 2 channels can be used for things like flaps and gear. That's done. Now what these other things are here, it says aileron direction, elevator direction, rudder, and all that other stuff, is these are the directions that the correction is going to make on your control surfaces when the plane's kind of moving around from wind. So if you notice when you're checking your airplane and you're like tipping the left wing up, the correct way for that to move to compensate for that is the gyro is going to have to move that aileron upwards as well to try to push that wing back down to keep it stable. If it's moving in the opposite direction of what you want it to, you're going to have to go in there and you're going to have to select this and you're going to have to reverse them. That's all you need to do. Once you do that, it's automatic, and then those control surfaces and stabilization will automatically reverse. That is the only way to reverse the stabilization is in this Lewis script. You cannot do it in the radio. So if it's moving the wrong direction when you're checking the airplane before flight, hopefully, you need to go in here and you need to change those directions. It's easy to do that. It's easy to know what direction they're supposed to move in. Like I said, when you tilt the plane to the right, when you roll it to the right, if the left, whatever wing is up, then your control surface needs to be up. If the wing is down, the control surface needs to be down. That's how it properly corrects. If they're opposite, you need to go in there and reverse these. Same with the elevator. If you've got the tail section of the plane up, you should see that elevator come up, which means it's trying to bring the nose of the airplane up. If it's not, you need to go in there and reverse it. And the same thing for rudder and so on. All these other readings that you see down here at the bottom that have these numbers, don't touch them. Don't worry about them. You don't need to worry about those at all. You just need to worry about these if you have to reverse them. Now, if you need to reverse control surfaces in its entirety, if they're turning the wrong way when you're moving control surfaces on the radio, those are the settings that you change inside the radio on the mixer page or in the servos page by reversing the servos. But this is specifically for stabilization only and nothing else. Okay, so we've got that set up. So I already have one set up in an airplane. So what I'm going to do is show you how to access the calibration mode now. I'll show you the receiver, how I mounted it, and I'll show you how to access the calibration, and I'll tell you why you calibrate it. Now, they tell you have to calibrate it on the bench before you fly it the first time. You also have to calibrate it after you fly it, because you don't ever fly it the first time using stabilization. You only fly it in off mode. You fly it in normal mode for the purpose of trimming out the aircraft, getting it to fly straight and level. Then you land the airplane and you recalibrate it to tell the stabilization system where the control surfaces have been set to. That's the purpose of that. I'm pretty sure you can probably set your airplane up and fly it in off mode one time, then bring it down and calibrate it one time afterwards, and then you're done. But for some reason they tell you to calibrate it before too, so I'm going to follow the rules for whatever reason. I'm sure there's something hidden in there. But let me show you what I did here. And I told you in the last video that you had to mount this thing with the pins backwards, just like that one is. And it had to be square with the airframe. Now, it doesn't have to be flat. It can be on its side or on its other side, but you have to go into the Lewis script and tell it that the receiver is not laying flat, it's laying on one side or the other. But no matter how you put it in there, it has to have the pins facing towards the back of the aircraft. And not only that, make sure you have it extremely secure in the aircraft before you fly it, because any movement at all of that receiver, if that receiver's flopping around in there or anything, it's going to tell that stabilization system to activate, and you're going to have your hands full. So instead of using sticky tape, Velcro straps, which can pop loose or whatever, I put a little bit of hot glue down in the foam, and I stuck the receiver to that and let it cool. I can still get the receiver out if I want to, but it's a lot less likely to fall off in flight and kind of wobble around inside the airframe and me try to figure out what the heck is going on. Now, I'm going to go ahead and power this thing up, and one thing to note, take the prop off, because to get out of the calibration mode, you're going to have to cycle the throttle, and you don't want that prop hitting anything. So give me just a second here to plug a battery in. Set the radio.
Switch warning.
All right, let's see what we got here. Of course, it would help if I selected the right airplane, but let's see here.
Switch warning.
Okay, now we've got the airplane powered up. So now I can show you how to calibrate it once it's installed inside the airplane. Now, on the radio, this is my mode switch. This is normal mode. That's without stabilization, flying it like an everyday airplane. This here in the middle on that 3-position switch is flight stabilization, where you can adjust it with the pod for sensitivity. Up is full-blown stabilization. Now, when that is in any of these positions of the stabilization positions, if you get into trouble, you can flip a spring-loaded switch once you assign it to it after calibration to get you out of trouble if you need to. But right now we have it assigned to that 3-position switch right here, so we can turn on the calibration. That's the only way to do it. It's got to cycle up and down 3 full times within 3 seconds to turn on calibration. The other thing you need to know too, make sure you've got all of your control surfaces set up and level, straight, flat, and squared off. The plane mechanically set up before you enter calibration mode. You want it because it's going to calibrate it to what normal flight mode is. And you also have to prop up the back of the aircraft and level the airplane with a slight nose pitch up attitude of about 1 to 2 degrees. It don't have to be exact, but it's got to be close to that. I've got mine sitting on a block right there. So it's level. So to enter calibration mode, after we set everything up on the airplane and we've got all of our control surfaces working in the right directions, our elevator's working in the right direction. After we do that, we're going to cycle this switch 3 times back and forth within 3 seconds. Here we go. And your control surfaces will do that once it enters calibration mode. It's important to note as well that it will not enter calibration mode if your throttle trim is up. So make sure your throttle trim is pulled all the way down. This one right here is down before you enter calibration mode, or it just won't do it. Once you enter calibration mode and you've squared everything off, you're going to go ahead and move all the control surfaces, everything except throttle. You're going to do aileron first, both ways, elevator, both ways, and you're going to do rudder, both ways. Once you do all those, just go ahead and cycle the throttle and it exits calibration mode. You are done. That's how you calibrate the airplane. Now, the first time you fly it, again, I'm reminding you, do not fly it in stabilization mode. Make sure you turn it off, and that's by putting the switch all the way down. Fly the airplane on its flight to get everything trimmed out and everything flying good the way you like it. Set your expos, whatever you've got to do, flying the plane in normal mode first. Bring it down, recalibrate it like I just showed you, and then after that, you're good to go. That's all you need to do to calibrate this thing. I know these were a couple of lengthy videos. The first one was close to 30 minutes. This one's sitting at close to 30 minutes. But I can tell you right now, once you do this one time, this will only add about 10 minutes total to setting up one of these receivers in your airplanes, and you'll be glad you did it. Have a great day.